Fishing like a local isn't just about catching fish. It's about connecting with the environment and the people who call it home. It's about hearing the stories and traditions that have been passed down for generations and sharing unforgettable moments with the people you meet along the way. Fishing like a local is having an experience that stays with you forever. And with Fishing Booker, you can experience it too, no matter where you are. Discover your next adventure on Fishing Booker.
This upcoming concert season will be all about the boots, and Tecovas is your stop for the best in Western style. Tecovas has seasonal and limited edition offerings this spring and summer, including men's and women's boots, apparel, hats, bags, and more. All Tecovas boots are made by hand in a time-honored tradition with timeless styles that are always on trend. And Tecovas has first wear comfort with little to no break-in period. It's hard to find this level of comfort paired with this level of style. Stop by your local Tecovas store, have a complimentary drink or two, that's WCB style, and shop new styles. The smell of fresh leather and friendly staff are at your service. Many stores even have leather custom branding to make your boots truly personalized. And with regular live music and events, there's no in-store experience like it. If you can't make it into a store, just visit tecovas.com. That's TECOVAS.com. They offer free shipping on all boots, as well as free returns and exchanges, and ship right to your door. Go to tecovas.com and find your new favorite pair of boots today.
Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together.
So we are joined today by Matt Normansell, and he is from England, and I'm just going to preempt this whole conversation by saying that he has an unfair advantage in sounding more smart than we do because he has an English accent. And hey Matt, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Yourself?
Oh, pretty good. Can you let us know who you are and what you do?
So I'm Matt Normansell. I've been in Wisconsin now for about 7 years, but before that was teaching foraging full-time, traveling all over the UK for the previous 10 or 12 years. And then when I moved to Wisconsin, I set up the Wild Food Wisconsin Facebook group and kind of grew the community for foraging in Wisconsin. And I teach classes here, but obviously the seasons are a lot shorter, so I don't do it full-time now, but I teach in the Wisconsin season.
Yeah, so foraging here is a much shorter season than I gather it is on the British Isles. So
yeah, for sure.
So you were able to teach classes like all year round?
Well, I took a break in December and January for sure, but that time was spent. I used to go to Scotland and collect chaga, which is a medicinal mushroom. I used to sell some of that to herbalists, as you guys would say, herbalists. Mm-hmm. And then that would be a supplement to my income there. But yes, about 10 months of the year I would teach. I would start off with coastal foraging because that's a bit milder and a bit more predictable. So I start off doing a Valentine's Day course in February, and then I would teach right the way through the year through to some late mushroom courses in November, and then I would kind of stop for a couple of months in the winter. But yeah,
man, that is pretty amazing that you guys had that big of a season. If you had to compare it to a climate here in the United States, which climate or place would you say it's like?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I've not traveled the US as much as I would like to, but my understanding based upon talking to a lot of other people and other foragers is that it's somewhat similar to something like Washington State or Oregon, like coastal. So you have, mild, you've got the sea surrounding it, so it kind of keeps things mild and a bit more stable. You have mild, wet winters and kind of temperate summers. So similar, but a little bit less rain. Although you've asked people that live there, they might debate with you because it's pretty rainy in the UK, but...
Wow. And Luke, you've ever been to England at all?
No, I have not. My wife has. Okay. I have not.
Yeah, I've never been to England either, and I'm actually pretty fascinated with the whole entire island. There's a book called Foundation that I just read last year. It's a history from all the way back in the Stone Age time to now, the history of England, and such a fascinating country to me. And like, I've wanted to ask this for a while since I knew you were coming on, but I had the idea that England was not a very diverse place, that it was actually like a pretty like historically, like everybody just chopped everything down since the Roman times, and it's just been a ruined ecosystem ever since. But I've come to learn that actually a lot of managed hedgerows are pretty diverse ecosystems. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, so hedgerows are one of my favorite sort of ecosystems, and it's one of the main things I miss. Being in America, I think by the formation of a lot of colonization of North America, by the time it really got going, you guys already invented barbed wire, and the distances were much larger, so it was just impractical to use dry stone walling or hedgerows and things like that. Anyway, it's far too labor intense. But obviously for thousands of years in the UK there's been hedge laying, where you physically would cut into the hedge and kind of fold it over on itself and lay it together to form boundaries to keep cattle in, etc. And then you get wild plants kind of growing through it as well. So I had one spot in Chester where I used to live where we had, I think it said 19 different species of edible plants, and in one 100-yard section of hedgerow. So various types of plums and cherry plums and blackberries and wild raspberries and nuts and hawthorn and sloes and all sorts of things. It makes it very easy to gather kind of a diverse amount of things, all at the same time, and then that creates a habitat underneath for edible herbs and plants, and then mushrooms that grow in the shade of the hedgerows and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely a nice, not urban. You get some hedgerows in the edges of urban areas, but kind of out on the edges of the countryside. You don't need to be right out in any sort of wilderness or anything. You can go on a walk. And one of the main differences between here and the UK as well, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this, is we have a kind of rights of way system. So you'll have public rights of way across private farmers' fields. So most of the time the path will go up along a hedgerow. So you have a right to be there. If you have a right to be there, you can forage stuff there. So you can go for a walk across these private fields, but you can harvest from these hedgerows. The farmer doesn't care either, because it's there as a boundary to his field. So but yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for density in those sort of ecosystems.
Yeah. So go ahead, Cliff. Go ahead.
No, Luke, you haven't talked.
I was going to say that when I was growing up as a kid in a small rural town, surrounded by farms and stuff, there used to be a lot more hedgerows, and we used to go hunting those hedgerows. We would actually take our guns with us to school, our shotguns, and then our shop teacher would take them and lock them up and not give them back to us until the end of the day. And then at the end of the day, he would give us our shotguns, and then we could go hunting after school and go pheasant hunting and just walk the hedgerows. But since most of those hedgerows have been destroyed, so the farmers could get 4 or 5 more rows of corn in on their field edges, and I just remember as a kid just seeing it all get devastated. The older I got, they'd just rip them out, put them in big piles, burn everything, and then the next year they'd be planting it. That's all.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
It is. It's a huge bummer because, like you mentioned, I mean, they're just a wonderful, diverse place within this little narrow lane in between all these monocrops.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually one of the first places that I actually did learn to hunt, it was in the UK. I had air rifles. I didn't have access to shotguns or anything you guys would consider more traditional fare for hunting, but both air rifle and slingshot, as you guys would call it. We used to call them catapults in my day. But I would have permission on a little bit of private land to hunt rabbit, and the rabbits would, unlike cottontails here, they mostly just dig little, depressions in the ground. They don't have burrows. In the UK, the rabbits there have big underground burrows, warrens, or whatever. So you get a lot of them along the hedgerow. So you could literally just sort of sit up against the hedgerow and wait, and at just before dusk there'll be 20 rabbits just pop out along the hedgerow. So
wow, cool. Really? That many?
Oh yeah, I mean often more than that, but it's a lot more difficult to hunt with an air rifle though, because you need to be inside of 30-40 yards to get an ethical shot with a sub 12 foot-pound air rifle. So but it teaches you that field craft and that kind of respect for the animal and stuff, I think is important.
Yeah. I actually did shoot a rabbit one time with an air rifle. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I shot it and it started like yelling, and this was a cottontail rabbit, like squealing, and I had to go over and shoot it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was not like an ideal situation.
Yeah, it's all about. I mean, it depends on what sort of air rifle you're using, because most of the time in the UK, when people are hunting with air rifles, because they don't have access to shotguns, they're spending the money that you would spend on a good shotgun on a very high precision quality air rifle, pre-charged pneumatic with a decent scope and stuff. So you can make that kind of precision shot. Whereas, I think a lot of air rifle hunting in America is like, we'll go down to Walmart and we'll buy the Ruger break barrel with the stock sights, and if I hit the rabbit, that's good enough, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you are totally correct in that.
In the UK, the American gray squirrel is an invasive species. So I think one year I shot 72 gray squirrels with the break barrel air rifle. So.
And did you used to eat them?
Yeah, I would eat them. I probably wouldn't eat like yard squirrels here, because people poison, rats and mice and stuff, and I'd be worried about them having, poison in the system. But that people don't really do that in the UK. So yeah, I would totally eat them. Yeah.
Yeah, that believe it or not, I saw a thing a long time ago about how they sell gray squirrels meat in grocery stores over in England.
Actually, the big one that was on the news all over the UK was a guy in Glossop, which is actually where I was living at the time. And he was taking the meat from basically, so gray squirrels are in the UK up to about Northumberland, which is up by the border between England and Scotland. And they're not in Scotland, and our native red squirrels there. And they want to kind of protect them because their gray squirrels carry a squirrel pox, and it kills off the red squirrels. So they have a culling system there, and then they don't have anything to do with the meat. So this guy was buying it in and making squirrel pot pie. And they were like really successful, and not something we would have traditionally eaten in the UK. But I think it was a bit of a novelty, but they were really good too. So
yeah, that's amazing. Now this is going to be a funny question next, but I recently was watching a video, again with my kind of obsession with the British Isles, about the medlar. Do you have experience with the medlar? And if you do you know the old name for them?
Medlar, the old name for them.
Yeah, so apparently it used to be called an open ass.
Okay, yeah, I've heard like the dog's bottom fruit and things like that, but yeah, they have that puckered kind of bottom on the base of the fruit, kind of like a little bit like you see with an apple or whatever. They're in the same family. Yeah. But yes, medlars are really good. They're a little bit like quince in a way, and you can make jams and jellies and pastes and stuff out of them. They're very traditional, like back through medieval times, medlars were eaten, and they're traditionally eaten when they're bletted, so when they're allowed to kind of break down and become a little bit soft, normally on the tree, and then you would pick them and eat them. But it's sadly kind of fallen out of favor a lot now. We actually used to have one by my house where there was a building that was abandoned, a Victorian building that burnt down. There was a whole orchard, and there was some medlars there. And sadly, years later, they came and leveled it all for new housing. But definitely a traditional British fruit.
That sounds awesome. The reference that I saw was that Shakespeare had called them an open ass in one of his plays.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense. If you've seen a picture of them, you can definitely see where he's getting that from.
Yeah. So talk about your transition here to this country, because I've been following you for many years on Facebook, and I've seen you go from the all-star foraging guy to now you're in this country with a much shorter season, and we've got all these rules, and you're into hunting. And what's it like coming here and being in this country?
Yeah, it was kind of a difficult transition in a way, but I think it's just because the way my brain works, I'm a little bit, ADHD, but kind of like hyper focused on stuff, and I think that's what kind of kept me motivated in the UK, is because I could forage something year round. Like literally, even the months that I wasn't teaching, I would find stuff to pick and eat and consume and focus on. And you kind of get a little bit of cabin fever here, which is kind of what got me initially into the hunting here, to kind of extend a season and a focus on wild food in that way. But yeah, so I moved here 7 years ago, and I kind of felt like I knew what I was getting myself into because I've been coming here sort of for 2 years on and off. But I don't think I quite realized how difficult it would be adjusting to the seasons. And it's not just the short length of the season in Wisconsin, but it's just how fast the seasons move. And you're probably aware, you go out and then you have to pick something right now. Otherwise, it's going to be gone. Like in the UK, I can look at something and be like, "No, there's elderflowers there. I'll get around to picking some of those this week, and they'll still be good. There'll be some there, and they'll be good." Here, I need to pick it that morning, otherwise they'll go over, and then within a couple of days, the whole tree is going to be going to fruit, and I won't have any opportunity to pick them. So, I think you very much have to kind of pick what you find when you find it, and kind of be pretty proactive because the spring season gets over pretty quick, and then you continue with the mosquitoes in summer. And the good thing about fall is the fall mushroom season stretches into what I would not consider to be fall. Like that's what I kind of found a bit weird about Wisconsin because you don't get mushrooms in the UK in fall until it starts autumn, until it starts cooling down. Whereas you get a good amount of autumn fall mushrooms in late August in Wisconsin, even when it's still in the 70s and early 80s. So it's more about the trees and how they're starting to wind down and stuff. So.
That's very interesting. So what are the similarities between our countries as far as foraging and hunting? And what are some of the major differences that you've noticed?
I think the good thing about mushrooms is they tend to colonize a lot of places in the world. So a lot of the mushrooms here are the same, and then there's quite a few additional ones in terms of the edible mushrooms, but it's not kind of as crazy different. The plants, there are completely different plants, genuses and stuff here that don't exist in the UK. So I had to relearn some of that. But other things again are the same. And a lot of the edible invasive species are kind of my country's fault. So a lot of the decent edible invasives come from Europe or the UK. So I was already familiar with all of that, and it's kind of nice because there's certain things I know how to use in certain ways that aren't popularly used here. They're used in different ways here, so I can bring a different spin to stuff. Yeah, and in terms of hunting, I did a little bit of small game hunting in the UK, but I'd never shot a gun other than a shotgun at clay pigeon shooting. I'd never shot a rifle until I moved here. And I started off with turkey hunting actually, because that was the thing that appealed most to me because I'd never even seen a wild turkey before I moved here. They would kind of seemed like a mythical creature almost in a way. And honestly, the first time I saw a wild turkey up close was the first one that I shot. It was kind of funny. I'd seen them in the fields. I'd heard them, but yeah, literally one just wandered straight up to my decoy. The first hour of the first day I went out was the archetypal definition of beginner's luck. But yeah, there's a big difference in that culture between hunting in the UK and hunting here. It really isn't much of a big deal in the UK, and the people who do hunt primarily are the occasional farmer and the upper class. And I think that's a lot of why people are kind of anti-hunting in a lot of ways in the UK because it isn't accessible to everyone. I would say one of the biggest culture shocks for me when I came here, and this is still gets me, is I was looking for somewhere to grouse hunt. I want to see a grouse. I bumped a few grouse walking in the woods. I want to find somewhere to grouse hunt. My friend said, why don't you just contact one of the conservation wardens for the DNR for that area? And I'm like, what? And the idea that you could call someone up whose job it was to conserve animals in the UK and be like, hey, where can I find a good place to shoot some of these is anathema. It's two completely different things. Whereas here, hunting and conservation kind of go hand in hand, and they support each other and try and balance, that ecosystem and a kind of life cycle of stuff. But that still gets me, the idea that you can, I could email someone and be like, where's a good place to go grouse hunting? And they'll just tell me, they'll be like, try this area. It's still kind of weirds me out a little bit.
Luke, you went out turkey hunting today. How'd you do?
I was on them first light this morning. but they were just in some thick stuff and they weren't coming out. They got a little bit closer. I was up on a ridge and they just wouldn't come up it. So I dropped down on the ridge, and as I dropped down on the ridge, they got a little further away. Well, they were taking an easier way to come back up. So I wasted all my efforts getting down there for absolutely nothing. And then they went and bypassed me and went out into an open field, and I could hear them out in the open field. So then I went and hightailed it through the woods as fast as I could to get to a field edge, saw them, called them in, but I couldn't get them closer than 70 yards, maybe 75 yards. And it was just through some old stubble of some cornfield. And I was like, okay, I can't do anything here. Waiting. Didn't have a decoy with me. If I would have thrown that decoy out there, they would have probably ran right up to it. But so I did that, and then I just I chased a few along, and I started just walking through the woods, and I'd just start yelping every once in a while, and you'd hear a gobble going off in the distance, and then I just try and call them in. I ended up calling another tom in, and I was in the field, and I could tell he was just hightailing it right towards me, and I could hear him. So there was some grass that was 2 or 3 foot tall grass. I laid down, and I was expecting him to come kind of where he was. Well, he circled around to see what it was, and when he circled around, there I am laying in the field in the bare dirt, and there's this turkey walking right past me, and then he took off running. So, I mean, I had some fun today, but nonetheless, I was unsuccessful. Saw some deer though too. A lot of foraging stuff, but didn't really pick any because I was so focused on trying to take a bird. So tomorrow is another day. Get up bright and early, and I have a decoy with me now. So hopefully success.
Nice. And then Matt, you've been out turkey hunting too?
Yeah, I've been out. I drew week A for my allotted, lotto, whatever it was, tag. And then I managed to get a week C in the bonus tag drawing. So, I've been out 3 times. But yeah, first time, almost nothing. I could hear a few calls in the distance, but nothing back to me and nothing, no interest at all. And then this last time I went out was about 3 or 4 days ago, and I got a little bit of calling, but mostly. I hear it moving away from me, The way I set up, I hunt a friend's farm in northeast Wisconsin, and I don't really have the opportunity like Luke to kind of chase birds. There's not enough kind of cover and not enough area to cover, so it's only about 100 acres. I found through kind of trial and error that most of the birds there don't like being able to see my decoy from a lot across the field. I had a couple of successes with them coming in, but a few times I've seen that they just didn't like what my setup was, and if they can see it from 200 yards away, they'll come and have a look at 100 yards and then just scoot off somewhere else. So I've set up now kind of in a secluded area where they have to kind of come within range to see my setup. Hoping that I can draw them in, but obviously if they don't come in, then I don't even know where they are. They're out in the field somewhere, or out in the woods, and no luck this time. So I shot one last year, but I had to stalk up on that one. I could hear it, and it wasn't moving, and it was henned up. I pumped my head out the tent, and I could see it about 300 yards away, and I just slowly crept up on it, and then all the hens scattered, but he still didn't see me, so I managed to bag that one. Luke, we're talking about 70 yards. A couple of years ago, I had a few that were hanging up at about 70 yards, so I went back and I hand loaded. I've got 2-ounce load of TSS in a 3-inch shell. And I tested that out to, I think it still holds a pattern to 90 yards. So not that I would really want to shoot a turkey at that distance, but it will take a turkey at 70 yards. So
yeah, I'm shooting 3.5s with 6-shot, copper plated 6-shot, but I just, with all the stubble and everything in the way, there was no way I was going to try and take a shot. And it was the rise, there was a rise in the field, and they were kind of just crested on I guess you call it the military crest, where they were on the backside of the ridge of it. And it wasn't an ideal. If they would have came over a little bit more, it would have been perfect. I was hoping they would, but I think I really want to employ a ghillie suit, and then just I could even sit in the middle of the field and just look like a giant hump of grass or something. I don't know. I'm really today. I had a lot of time to brainstorm. So
Don't you guys ever get afraid of getting shot though? Like maybe not you, Matt, because you're hunting on private, but public, you're like walking all around the place. Like I just saw a post the other day, some kid got shot um at 60 yards on public land.
well, that's on the other hunter, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, on public land most of the time, so it's different in different places to where, maybe in Michigan, 100 people could go flock to public land, but it's regulated in Illinois to where only a certain amount of people are allowed to hunt the area anyway. And so this morning, the first place that I wanted to hunt, I was looking at the wrong time zone of different sunrises on the weather app to get this. So I was actually late, but it worked out. But I drove past one parking lot of one of the hunting areas. There was a car in there, so I said, okay, I'm gonna pull an audible, go to the next one that I know of that I want to hunt. And so I used my backup option and ended up being a really good option and got on birds right away. I sent you that video of and I was just purring and putting and they right away just fired off, and I was like, no way. All right, this is great, and that was like right when it was like 5:09 or something was the time it was, and so right away I just, as soon as my phone hit that time, I did that, and then next thing you know, they were just firing off, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be a fun day. Yeah.
Wow.
And then I got smacked in the face with some poison oak, so we'll see what happens there.
I'm not really frightened of getting shot in turkey season because, like I said, I'm on private land, but also like even if I went on public land, it's just shotgun. Like if they're far enough away to not be able to tell what I am, then I'm probably out of range for any real danger anyway. So, but yeah, for deer or something that involves centerfire rifle cartridges, then yeah, I'm not a big fan of like any sort of confusion and in that sense.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think I was saying that, because turkey season, at least here in Michigan, there's no hunter orange required because turkeys could see you if you were wearing orange.
That's the same.
Yeah, so that's why I think more often people get shot during turkey seasons. And you're right, they do get shot with a shotgun. And usually it's not fatal. But it still would suck, getting shot with a shotgun.
But the crazy ones I've seen, what do they call those decoys where they're physically behind the decoy and they're moving, like
they're reaping.
That's a recipe for getting shot in the face. But yeah,
that is like the heads up decoys and all those. That seems like not a good idea for turkey hunting. And that's why I don't carry a decoy normally. But today, after having them to where they just wouldn't come in on that piece of ground where there was that big field, because normally if I'm in certain spots of the woods, it's just like a clearing in the woods that I can kind of lure them into, and I'll see them. And it's tight enough to where when they come in there, you could try and get them. But in this scenario, it was a wide open field that was big. So I needed to try and bring them in. So the decoy definitely would help out there. But I would never carry a fan. I mean, unless I'm on private land. Just flapping that fan around, even if you hold your hand up, I don't want my hand to get shot.
Yeah. So, Matt, tell me about some of the things that you alluded to a little bit ago that are foods that you know how to cook differently, and like maybe you'll prepare differently.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, it just depends, kind of, what we're talking about. But like, for example, one I don't see people using a lot here. So garlic mustard, or Jack by the Hedge, as we call it in the UK. A lot of people just don't like it because it's an invasive. So they just, I think there's almost like a psychological bar to like wanting to eat it because they view it as, evil or, invasive or whatever. But primarily I see people just using the greens. But my favorite part of that is just right about now where I am is the flexible stem. So the flowering stem, and just break it like you would asparagus. And that's one of my favorite ways to use that. Just literally cook it like asparagus, or strip the leaves off, steam them or boil them. And it's excellent. And I just don't really see people here using that so much,
Is that okay? Because I personally detest garlic mustard. I think it tastes disgusting. Does that stem taste better than the leaves?
Yeah, so it's generally a lot milder, but also if you're boiling it as well, then you're be extracting any of those bitter flavors out of it. But yeah, it tends to be milder than the leaves. Yeah.
Well, it's not actually. That's the funny thing. I've had to explain this probably like 6 or 7 times this year. It's not the bitterness because I like bitter foods. It's like there's some off flavor in garlic mustard that I just can't. No, it's like
is it the issue was it raw or is it cooked or what?
Oh no, cooked. It just tastes. There's just like a disgusting taste to me. I don't know. I don't like it. And it's kind of funny for me to say because like I'll eat anything, and garlic mustard just yeah. No, I'll still eat garlic mustard. I mean, one of the things I tell my kids all the time is, who cares if you don't like something? You just eat it anyway. Like that's just always been my mentality. You go to somebody's house and they serve something you don't like. I mean, are you going to be rude and be like, I don't want to eat this, or are you going to just like shovel it down your face?
Yeah, but my wife can't eat garlic mustard though because it upsets her stomach when she eats it raw. So I know some people have issues with it raw because it's it can impact some people like that. But no, I think it tastes fine. So I guess it's just you.
Yeah,
it's just strictly. I like garlic mustard.
Yeah. So that's called Jack by the Hedge, eh?
Yeah. So anything that had a garlicky taste, like Patricia in the UK was referred to as like Jack something because Jack was the devil, a word for the devil, and garlickiness was associated with the devil. So
no way.
Apparently so. Yeah.
That's amazing. Now I know another thing that I've seen you do before is correct me, I think I've seen you eat like goldenrods.
Yeah, we eat goldenrod shoots. That's actually something I picked up here. So like not so much in the UK. So there's like a lot of different species of goldenrod in Wisconsin and in the US. But yeah, I'm trying to think of something that I do that's kind of different than here. I kind of get muddled because obviously like I take bits from everything. But
yeah,
we do a lot. I do a lot of wild brewing, like wine and home brew and things like that, which I don't think you've got a particularly strong culture of it in Wisconsin because it sounds silly, but alcohol is really cheap here. There's a big drinking culture, but alcohol is very cheap. So there's not really any like financial impetus to make your own alcohol. Whereas in the UK, like, there's quite a lot of taxes on wine and and alcohol in general, so there's a lot more of a culture of making like hedgerow wines and things like that. So one of my favorite ones, and I've not seen a lot of people do it, is Japanese knotweed wine. So I follow a step, basically the same recipe as a rhubarb wine, but I just use about 1.5 times the amount of Japanese knotweed because it doesn't have quite the same sugar levels and just needs a bit more to get that flavor, but it makes like a rosé wine. So
dang, dude, that's pretty cool. Japanese knotweed wine. You could actually probably start like a business here and just head on over to any East Coast state, and you'd have enough Japanese knotweed to have an industrial business.
But it's funny because here people go on how invasive it is, but it doesn't actually seem to me to be that invasive here. Like it takes over stands at the side of the road and things like that. But in the UK, like it literally gets underneath people's houses and pushes up through the foundations and like destroys houses. And there's, you can't even sell your property if it's got Japanese knotweed on it without you digging down 6 feet and removing it all, like and bagging it up and disposing of it because it is pretty destructive there. It's invasive here, but it's not. I don't think it seems to be as destructive.
Have you ever? So you never been over to any of the East Coast states though? Because like in particular, I think of when I went to Maine. I was actually blown away at how pervasive it actually is over there.
Okay, yeah, then maybe it is the same then as the UK, but I've been to Maryland and Pennsylvania, but I've not been to Maine yet. So.
I'm Will Cooper, host of HuntStand's Make Your Mark podcast. If you haven't already, download the free Waypoint TV app to listen to our podcast and watch the original films from HuntStand Presents, anywhere, anytime, and on any device.
Brave anglers search for the one they call king, but who will take his throne? Tune in to Waypoint TV's Battle for Silver, Saturday, May 18th from 12 to 6 p.m. Eastern, presented by Abyss Battery. Waypoint TV.
How's it by you, Luke? Japanese knotweed?
Not that bad.
Not that bad?
No.
Yeah, I mean, in in here where I live, northern Michigan, we're so sandy that I think that Japanese knotweed can't invade sand. So like we have a couple patches, but I have to go out of my way to actually look for the stuff.
Yeah.
You
I
know.
mean, like, I've seen it in a few places, but it's not like super prevalent. And I think maybe because we're pretty sandy here too. Like I've told you before, most of my neighbors are actually mostly sand, and then like right where I am though, because it's on the creek, is a little bit rockier and clay based, but it's kind of sandy soil. So maybe that's why. I don't really know. A lot of pokeweed though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sand in general, I think inhibits the growth of a lot of plants. And sounds like England is quite rich soil, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite diverse in terms of the geology, and you do get like, sandier and limestonier areas and stuff, but there's a lot of like heavy clay and good quality soil, so it makes it easy for things to kind of establish. It's actually kind of interesting though about Japanese knotweed, because you see like people try and get rid of it, and they cut the stems and either spray the plant, which doesn't work, it just kills it for that year. Or if you cut and inject the stems, it can kill it eventually, but it doesn't do a very good job of it. There's a study, and I don't have it to hand, unfortunately, but there's a study that they did in Germany. It was on a river valley. And basically, that instead of poisoning it, they just cut and covered it. So they would cut it to the ground. Every time it came up, they would cut it, and then they would cover it with boards or cardboard or whatever. And they were then using that to make jams and chutneys and things like that. And then basically after, I think it was 5 or 7 years, the patches have been either completely depleted or heavily depleted, so it was being controlled, and there was also an industry in producing stuff from it. So I always think it's kind of weird when people spend so much money on trying to kill stuff, when it's like even garlic mustard, like rather than poisoning stuff, just go pull it up and use it, make something out of it. Same with anything like autumn olive and all these invasive species, rather than spending a lot of money and energy and effort to destroy something, just use it, utilize it, and find a method of control that benefits us too.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I actually many years ago wrote that an article called something about how we should turn our sites of capitalism onto like invasive species and make like industries out of these products, because like everybody's always complaining on one hand about invasive species, but then they don't want to encourage the use of these products because they say that it'll make people dependent on them. And
It's one of those things, like you can't, to a degree, you can't get rid of most of this stuff. Like once it's established, like you'll never get rid of Japanese knotweed from North America because it's established here. Same with most of these invasives. So you're fighting a losing battle. Why not? Find a way to utilize it?
Yeah, I'm there with you. Now, I do have a question though in that regard. Jack by the Hedge. It's been shown to have this. It's got this chemical in it called sinigrin that it pumps out of its roots to inhibit the growth of plants around it. But they have shown that given a long enough time, it actually stops producing that in a certain ecosystem. Like once it's been there for 25 years or so, it stops producing that. And so they're saying that in 50 years, like many of these places that we see here that are overrun by garlic mustard are not going to be overrun anymore. Now, I know that it's been in England longer than it's been here. So what is your perception of the differences in garlic mustard over there versus here?
Yeah, and I think I read the same study. I think there was one out of Illinois as well that showed the reduction in the the production of that compound, and it makes sense because it's a very energy intensive compound to produce in large amounts, and once it's established, it doesn't need to do it anymore. And I think with most like plants in general, like they move through a cycle of invasive to non-native to naturalized, and a lot of these things will find a place in the ecosystem. Now, yeah, it can be damaging, and yes, it can potentially outcompete other stuff in the meantime, and cause changes to ecosystems and stuff. But I do think for the most part, it will find its place eventually. Like you say, it may take 30 years, 50 years, but I think it will settle down and find its place kind of in that ecosystem eventually.
Yeah. So, but in regards to England, does it seem less persistent than it does over here? Like, I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
yeah, it definitely doesn't grow to the same intensity. So Jack by the Hedge, as the name suggests, it's primarily growing, along hedgerows and roadsides, like slightly shaded. You don't tend to find it so much in woodland. So you might get it on the edges of woodland, but you won't find it like you do here, like just smack bang in the middle of a piece of woodland in huge rides. It doesn't really grow like that in the UK because there are other, cover species or trees that kind of keep the light down enough to kind of keep it out really. And like you say, probably isn't producing the same level of those chemicals to outcompete other things. So
Very fascinating. Um, so are you looking forward to doing any sort of fishing then this season, or are you not really much of a fisher?
so I would love to be a good fisherman, but I just don't seem to have any luck at it. I've tried a number of times. I think for me, the thing that gets me about fishing is I can't see the fish. It sounds stupid, but like, if I'm hunting, I'm like hearing an animal or I'm looking at an animal and I can see what I'm chasing. But I haven't caught enough fish to get the experience on, look at this piece of water, look at the bait I'm using, get enough information to kind of get that feedback on what I'm doing right and wrong. And I think that's kind of where I fall down on it a bit. And also, I just don't think I have a lot of people around me who have been able to mentor me into that well enough. I used to do a little bit of sea fishing in the UK.
Mhm.
That's super easy at the right time of year because you can catch a whole bunch of mackerel. That was my favorite thing to do. Just go and sit on the rocks and cast out, and 7 hooks, so you can get 7 mackerel, and it's just that's the easiest fishing possible. But yeah, I've tried a few times here. I used to be really big into coastal foraging in the UK in general, so I got a lot of shellfish and coastal plants and stuff. So I'd love to kind of do a bit more fishing for sure. Ice fishing doesn't really appeal to me. Kind of sitting out in a cold lake doesn't really do it for me. I've done it. I've done it a couple times. But I would love to catch some trout or some bass, or I don't know. I don't really like sport fishing. It's not really for me. It's like grabbing the turkey and then just releasing it again. It's kind of doesn't really do it for me.
Well, then you don't want to go bass fishing because people will want to hang you if you end up taking them and killing them.
Yeah.
So,
The last time I went fishing, I went with a friend of mine on the Wolf River, and we went channel cat fishing, and we caught a few. And then he put it on a stringer, and then by the time we got back across the lake, they'd had managed to somehow escape from the stringer, so I didn't even get to eat them.
What?
too small of a
That
stringer,
sucks.
probably.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, is that what happened, Luke?
Well, I mean, if they're big were they really big catfish?
They're a channel catfish, but they're decent size. Yeah.
I mean, they
don't
probably
know why.
broke. I mean, yeah, we've caught 20-pound catfish before, and they'll break a small, like your little regular stringer that's like a little tiny piece of string. You need like an actual rope one.
Mm.
Dang, man.
Yeah, but I have a question for you then, Matt, because in the UK it seems that carp fishing is way more popular than over here in the United States. And is there like a reasoning behind that you know of, or?
I think that's one of their big sport fish. It's just a big fish, it's like one of the biggest fish you can catch. And you were kind of talking a little bit there about like the bass fishing and it's a sport fish versus people want to eat them, and that's going to cause conflict. Well, that's kind of the same thing in the UK with the carp. So carp is traditionally a catch and release sport fish. And I think some areas you're allowed to take them, but I think generally they're considered a catch and release fish. But we've got a lot of Eastern European immigrants in the UK, and carp is a traditional fish eaten at like Christmas, and it's a traditional meal. So you get a lot of kind of conflict in that community with the Polish people, catching carp and taking them home, putting them in the bathtub and feeding them up for Christmas. And people are like going crazy about it because they obviously want to, catch and release them. But
That is so funny.
Yeah, it's strange to me how one thing is prized or valued somewhere, and somewhere else it's like, nope, it's garbage. It's absolute trash.
Yeah, and I always find that weird. I never take anyone's word for anything when it comes to edibility of food. Like for example, we've got some Gyromitra Brunia mushrooms in right now, and a lot of people are like, oh, I don't like them. Or even pheasant backs, for example, people don't claim they don't like them, but I think most of it's down to how you cook stuff, and I think that especially is true with wild game. I think it's funny because in the UK, the people that do hunt tend to, I think my experience, have a higher level of cooking skill than the people who hunt here to a large degree. So a lot of people who hunt just do it. They're subsistence hunters. They're just used to growing up. I'll shoot a deer. We'll make a chili or some steaks or whatever it might be. A friend of mine, Luke, he was telling me like he went to a steak restaurant once when he was in college, and that was the first time he'd ever had meat that wasn't like cooked well done or over well done. Like a steak to him was like just a well done cooked piece of deer meat, So I think a lot of it does come down to preparation. So yeah, I'd never take people's words for it when it comes to fish or anything like that. I'll try it myself, and if I like it, I'll use it.
Yeah, I had venison for dinner tonight. Another chunk of backstrap, grilled to perfection, medium rare.
Wow.
And my kids were like, oh man, it's so good. All of them want to hunt only so they can just have the steaks. That's all they care about.
Matt, have you ever had an opportunity to shoot a deer?
Yes, so I've shot, how many have I shot? 3 or 4 now.
Oh,
so
sweet.
I got permission from a friend of mine to go out to his parents' land. 4 or 5 years ago was the first time I went out, and I shot 2 deer. That year I shot a yearling doe and then a spike buck this on the second day. So that was pretty good. I got to actually have experience. The big learning curve with me for deer, and the thing that put me off kind of getting into it, is because I didn't have the equipment. I haven't got a gambrel. I don't have a pickup truck or anything like. So I was like, I don't want to go out to public land. I don't even know how to set up a tree stand or anything like that. It seems like quite a bit of a learning curve if you don't have help. But my buddy took me out. They got deer stands set up. I practiced my shooting beforehand, so I knew I had my rifle set in and everything. So I shot the deer. They've got an ATV, they can help me drag it out, and they've got a garage with a gambrel set up, and he'll teach me then how to skin the deer and take the deer apart and stuff. So it's a lot less intimidating when you have someone there who's going to kind of mentor you a bit with that.
So Matt, have you ever? Well, I guess I should say, one, do you have a hiking pack?
Yeah.
Well, bring that with you, and then I just quarter them up. Right there in the field, I'll quarter them up unless it's a very short drag. Otherwise, I will quarter them up, throw them in that backpack, and I'll just walk out with the whole deer inside of the backpack.
Yeah, I need to check the legality of that in my state. I think it used to not be legal to do that, but I do think you can do it now.
Yeah, it's legal. Like even in Illinois, people still don't know that it's legal, but you have to leave evidence of the sex.
Yeah, I remember there's some like niceties about that. Yeah, and
it has to be attached to a quarter, which isn't a big deal. I mean, you just cut around and leave it hang when you're quartering it up, and then I could take it, and then you don't have to worry about having to have a cooler, a walk-in cooler or anything to put it in. I put it in a cooler on top of ice and a little bit of ice on top. It melts around, it goes to the bottom, and I leave the drain open so it's not sitting in water. And then over the course of like the next 3 days, I will just go out and just keep, processing it one quarter at a time until it's all done.
Hmm. Yeah, I never take a cooler with me hunting because I think I'm really superstitious. Every time I've ever taken a cooler with ice in it hunting, never got anything.
Oh, you don't bring the ice. You don't bring the ice.
Pretty much every time. No, I don't. I'll just because where I hunt's only an hour from home. Like if I shoot a turkey or something, I go to the local store. I buy a pack of ice. I put it in a big 2-gallon Ziploc bag. Take it home. Every time I bring a cooler, don't get anything. Just jinxes it. I tried to go fishing with a buddy of mine. We went camping last summer, and as we were driving there, he said, "I've never been to this lake and not caught fish." And I said, "Well, you've jinxed it now. We didn't see a fish the whole weekend." So,
wow,
no way. That's funny. In England. Fishing is much different, right? Because you said that like a landowner owns the animals that live upon his land, right?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how that works with fishing. To be honest, I'm not very au fait about inland water fishing. So I do think technically fishing is, you couldn't fish it's not like here where you can walk up the river
Mhm.
I think that's legal here. You can just sit, you can walk in the water and walk. I don't think you can do that. It'll still technically be trespassing, but there are public, you can get public access to rivers and you can get a fishing license and fish. But again, I think most of that is still catch and release. I do think there's a little bit of trout fishing and stuff that goes on where you can keep them. But I think most of the people who fish for food, it's primarily sea fishing. So yeah, by the beach casting or casting off rocks, or it's going out in small boats. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. I used to live about 20 miles away from the sea. Actually, in the UK, you're never more than about 75 miles away from the sea. But yeah, I used to go up and there's a lot of fishing kind of up on the estuary near where I used to live. So,
now I ask this to all of our guests, and I can't forget to ask you, what is the absolute worst wild food you've ever eaten?
That's a good one.
I mean, it could be plant, mushroom, or animal.
So technically, it's not even. I don't know if it's inedible or edible or basically there's a mushroom called the ugly milk cap. In the UK specifically, this is where I was at the time, and I basically, if I'm teaching someone something, I like to have experienced it, and I actually I've tasted most poisonous plants and spat them out if I kind of calculated that it was kind of safe to do so, because I want to be able to tell people, if it doesn't taste like this, it tastes like this, you might have eaten the wrong thing, so I want to kind of have that experience. So I tasted this milk cap, the ugly milk cap, and it's kind of this ugly kind of white off brown kind of colored milk cap with this kind of off-white latex. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever put in my mouth. And swear to God, I could not get the taste out of my mouth for like a day and a half. Brushing my tongue kind of thing. Yeah, that was not pleasant.
So was that
not poison? It's not poisonous, but it's just disgusting.
So did you cook it, or are you saying like raw?
No,
I just
tasted it raw and immediately spat it out.
Oof.
Wow, a day and a half, huh?
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
So what other kind of stuff you got going on here, man? You got foraging classes coming up this summer?
I've got to put some in. I haven't actually booked any yet. My parents are coming for a month as of tomorrow, so I kind of kept that open, sort of, so I can hang out with those guys. So we'll have some stuff coming up in the summer, and then I hope to book quite a few more classes in fall this year. I'd like to try and get a few mushroom specific courses. It seems to be the way here in the UK. There's a lot more kind of fear around mushrooms, and maybe not quite as much kind of demand for specifically mushroom related stuff. I think there's just a little bit of fear around fungi in general. Whereas I find in Wisconsin, most of you guys come from the Germanic or Eastern European, like historical background, like your grandma was from Poland or Russia or Germany, and they're very big mycophilic cultures. So there's a lot of demand here for mushroom classes. So I'll probably be doing quite a few more of those this year specifically.
So are you ever afraid that you're gonna like advertise that there's gonna be a mushroom class, and then lo and behold, it's just been like a drought for like 2 months?
Yeah, I mean, that's specifically why I didn't used to do any mushroom only classes. Like, I would always do foraging courses. I would say, it's more mushroom season now. We're going to talk about a lot of mushrooms, but, we're going to cover everything. And it's actually really only since I moved here that I would do some mushroom only courses. What I found is, and you might associate with this a little bit, is that you might go on a walk and you might think, oh, I didn't find hardly anything. But you go out with someone who's a beginner and they go, oh, we found so much that was edible. You go and find 10 edible mushrooms. Well, I think, they should have been 45 species of edible mushrooms out today, but I only found 10. But, that to a beginner, that's 10 more than they already knew. So, yeah, I mean, if it is a really serious drought and I'm going out to pre-scan whether there's anything there, and there's nothing, then I will reschedule. But generally, there's enough to talk about. And I've got good enough spots that I kind of know, I've got like different areas. So I know if it's going to be really, really dry, there's one of the areas that's lower lying, it retains moisture better. That's the one I want to go for. Whereas maybe another one would be more productive in an ideal scenario. So I've switched up locations before now. But fingers crossed, I haven't had to actually cancel one here yet.
Now, I'm gonna totally agree with you here on what you said about mushrooms. If I advertise the word mushrooms in any of my stuff, those classes are like instantaneously sold out. And then I have to be like, we're going to talk about plants too. And it's like, everybody's like, boo. Like we don't want to talk about plants. We want to talk about mushrooms. And I'm like, this is so weird. But I do want to say last year at the Great Lakes Foragers Gathering, Chaotic Forager was there. And she taught a mushroom class, and it was so dry last summer before it started raining that there was not a single mushroom that she was able to talk about.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
I did a course where in the UK where we didn't find any edible mushrooms whatsoever, but we did find ergot, which is a deadly poisonous and psychedelic, fungus of growing on this was growing on rye actually in the edge of a field. So I could talk about some fungi. You can normally find something to talk about, but yeah, it's not ideal if you can't find a single mushroom.
So deadly poisonous and psychedelic. So
yeah, rye ergot, that's where LSD is synthesized.
Yes,
from.
they synthesized LSD from ergot. Ergotine was the original extract, I think, and it was used a lot in I used to use it in childbirth, I think. But if you eat ergot itself, it can create hallucinations, but it also causes like gangrene and like necrosis and stuff. So that's what ergotism is what they used to call it. Was basically what happened was that they used to make their bread from small farms. Like all of the bread would be made from the wheat or the rye from like one farm. And then, there was, I think the last case was in some point in the 1900s in France. It was this locally produced bread. There was so much, ergot ground up in this flour that it was basically poisoning people through the bread. So,
well, wasn't that how like the original absinthe, it was wormwood and then the rye, and the rye had the ergot or something in it that made people hallucinate, and then that's what caused like all the legends and myths and everything associated with
I'm not sure that there's
absinthe, that's what it was or something like that. And I think there's even another story about like during like the Napoleonic Wars or something that that the ergot actually made people hallucinate, and then like there was an entire town that like went into savagery and tore everybody
there's been
apart.
a lot of they call it like group hysteria kind of thing, but they think it's due to that. There's been some people that speculate that it's the Salem witch trials could potentially have been caused by ergotism, but there's been some sort of speculation, skepticism about that. But it's theoretically possible. There was, does occur in that area, would have been that kind of production of bread at the time, so it's possible.
What I find funny about it is I've been a wild rice harvester for over a decade, and ergot grows on wild rice. And it's really easy to spot, and we just pick it out.
Yeah.
So I always find that funny, that like there's this thing that causes people to have like St. Anthony's fire or whatever. Yeah. That's what that's called, where you get the burning sensation in your arms and your legs. And why didn't they just pick it out, or were they just tossing it in and just grinding it?
My guess is it was it was already like semi-industrialized process by that point. You threshing a whole bunch of it and throwing it into a cart, and you haven't got time to be picking individual pieces. I mean, it could just be that they just didn't know back then, or they didn't, or the people that were picking it didn't know or didn't care, or it could just be that they're, it's a more industrialized process and it's falling through the cracks, so to speak.
Yeah, last year we harvested a lake in Minnesota, right on the border of Wisconsin, and I swear to God, highest amount of ergot I've ever seen in a wild rice bed. We were knocking the rice in, and we were just like, holy crap, like this sucks. Like there had to have been like 40% ergot.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a different subspecies. It's like G1, G2, G3 or something, because they have different species preferences. So one of them's rye, one of them's wheat, and one of them is like wild grasses, which I would guess is what essentially wild rice. Maybe that would be a slightly different subspecies. So, I used to find it in the UK all on the wild grasses that grow along the seafront. I used to find a lot of it there. So,
wow, That's pretty cool. Now, one more thing I want to ask you real quickly before we do our wrap up is what do you think about huitlacoche, and do you eat that mushroom?
I've tried it. I don't deliberately go out and harvest a lot of it. I don't tend to find a huge amount of it personally, but I do. People are giving it to me. I've been told like, oh, it's all over my cornfield and stuff. Like my friend who I turkey hunt at, they actually rent several of the fields out to a farmer who plants corn, and several of the years since I've been here, there's been some of it in the field and stuff. So yeah, it's fine. It's not something I particularly prize. And again, I think it's just because I don't have a cultural background in using it necessarily. And I it's a novelty and I tried it. And then, for me, it's not something I'm not going to wander across it really. I'm not a farmer. I'm not out in the cornfields and stuff. So it's not something I'm going to happen across very often. If I find it, I'll take some, but yeah, it's not something I particularly search out.
Yeah, so, and I guess I should say though for everybody that huitlacoche is corn smut fungus.
Yep.
One
year I planted a pretty substantial patch of sweet corn, and I did not know what it was or that it was edible, and about 60% of my crop was infected with it. And I hear this whole time I could have been eating it and enjoying it, and instead it would just went to the birds.
Well, the funny thing is as well, like it's actually worth significantly more than the corn that you're growing. So there are people now that are selling cultures to try and grow it because like a field full of corn's worth X amount, but if you can get the market to sell this stuff, then it's actually worth significantly more than the corn.
Did not know.
That's super funny. Similar situation though, Luke. One time, this was probably 20 years ago now. I grew corn, had the one ear erupt in it, and I just was like freaking out, like, what the hell is this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is about 10 years ago. I didn't know. Yeah. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah. So Matt, how can people find you? What do we do to get a hold of you and attend one of your classes with one of your all of your amazing knowledge?
So I'm on Facebook, Eden Wild Food. Also edenwildfood.com is the website. And also if you want to join, one of the best foraging communities in the Midwest, Wild Food Wisconsin is the Facebook group that I started when I first moved here, and is a community of of foragers that kind of I think is quite different than a lot of the other groups in America in general. There's quite a lot of infighting in some of these mushroom groups, and we try and make it like a community where there's we not super strict, but we like to kind of jump on things before it gets out of hand. So it's family friendly too. So you've got kids can come look over your shoulder and there's not going to be any infighting. So but yeah, Eden Wild Food is my business name. So
I will say 100% Wild Food Wisconsin is a great group. I mean, when actually years ago when I found out that you made it, I was like, holy crap, this is a great group. Always great discussions going on over there. And yeah, you're such a valuable resource, and for years and years and years, I've just been like blown away especially by your mushroom knowledge. So everybody out there who's listened today, you should check Matt out. He is super, super intelligent and just like valuable to our community. So,
oh, thank you.
It was a wonderful having you on, man. Got to have you on again sometime in the future.
Sure.
Yeah, Luke, anything you want to say before we close up?
Thanks for coming on.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.
Oh, that's
awesome.
Don't miss Thursdays with Saltwater Experience, brought to you by Golden Boat Lifts, every Thursday night from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV, the destination for outdoor entertainment. A life that has the stories to back it, a life to be proud of. It's a Winchester life.
Yeah, baby, 6'8" Western. Oh, mule deer, baby, right there.
Tune in every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Waypoint TV.